This is the last Shabbat of the year. Good to see everyone. So today, because it's the last Shabbat of the year, and this year it's a combination of Nitzavim-Vayelech, I would like to speak to you about the subject of Tikkun. There are 4 different Tikkunim. Tikkun literally meaning repair, and it's obviously come from the both weeks Torah portion, Nitzavim-Vayelech. There is a mitzvah called Teshuvah, and Teshuvah can be taken in many different ways. There are numerous of Jewish thinkers, philosophers and writers that wrote about Teshuvah, but the core of that is the idea of Tikkun, which later on in the 16th century they call it Tikkun-Olam. And if we try to summarize the subject of Tikkun, there are 4 different types of Tikkun. There is a Tikkun that we call Tikkun according to Halacha, which means the Jewish mind by the way it's formulated in Jewish law. There is a Tikkun by Jewish theology and philosophy, meaning the soul repair, if we want to use the literal sense. There is another form of Tikkun that it's by the Kabbalah, mainly of the Kabbalah of the 16th century in Sefet. Then there is a Tikkun by the Hasidut, which is much later, the 18th, 19th century. Before we go to the subject of the Tikkun and Teshuvah, based on the fact that it's the last Shabbat of the year, and based on the fact that this is the last opportunity to say goodbye to the previous year and look forward for the next year, I would like to start with the covenant, the Brit. All familiar with the word bris in Yiddish or in Hebrew, Brit. We know bris is a bris milah when we're doing for the baby, but is another phase, another meaning of the Brit, which is the covenant between the Almighty God, the Creator, and our nation. The great wise people of the city of Aragon was a well-known Jewish city with endless writings of scholars of the 11th, 12th, 13th century. They asked a very deep question based on our parasha. There is a line, and I'm reading the translation from the Chumash. They use the word "et asher yeshno po," those who are here with us today, meaning this is the last day of Moses' life. He said goodbye to everyone. He's 120 years of age. Same day that he was born, he died, the 7th day of Adar. And he said, we have here a strong covenant between the Almighty God and our nation. But listen, he said, those who are here physically, us today, Ayom, ve'et asher enenu po imanu ayom. And this covenant applies also to those who are not physically here with us today. The obvious question the wise people of Aragon ask in Spain, but there are many others who ask that question in Provence and other Spanish Jewish scholarship of the 14th century. They ask a question: who gives the right to that generation, the generation of the desert, the people who live there and see the great revelation of Mount of Sinai, and how there and how come they commit themselves over something that did not happen yet? There is a lot of discussions in the Jewish law and the Jewish teaching. And we as a parents, as a grandparents, as a great-grandparents, commit ourselves to something that not yet born or something that cannot make their own independent decision retroactively. In language that it's written in the parasha at the very beginning, they say that this is a strong covenant between the people who are here today, and that covenant applies to those who are here today, but not physically with you, meaning people who will be a future generation. Asher einenu po imanu, people who are not here. So who are the people who are not here? The only people who are not here are people who are not born. Was a great minister of finance and great scholar by the name of Abarbanel. Jewish Spanish Don Yitzhak Abarbanel was among the people who are forced out of Spain by Isabel and Fernand in 1492. And his beautiful extensive writing, he expanded on this question. He asked the commitments that we make as a collective commitment, as a nation, is that something that the future generation can abide by? He tried to bring a beautiful allegorical explanation. He says, imagine that Mr., let's call him Reuven, he borrowed some money. And he takes that money, and all of a sudden, he's no longer among the living. So, in Jewish law, when we talk about Yerusha, or in Yiddish Yerusha, inheritance, not only that the children inheritance the wealth of the deceased father, mother, etc., it's also inheritance debt. So in that sense, the same way Abarbanel explained that we kind of have the pleasure or the enjoyment to receive inheritance from our past generation, we also have the commitment of paying off whatever left. In that sense, if we try to make it in a very clear, lucid, graphic way, we can say that if someone left, let's say, $2 million to his children, the first is the IRS or the bank or whatever it is, they first collect all the debt. And only then the trust attorney can give the person the amount that left over. So the Almighty said to the nation of Israel when they left Egypt, which we said every day, that you are my nation and you are my servant. And that's what we sing on Pesach, right? Avadim ayinu, right? That we are a slave in Egypt. So the same way as when you purchase in those days a slave, you purchase the rights, fully rights over the slave, including if the slave finds something, if the slave earned something, it's all yours at his owner or her owner. Therefore, the Almighty make this covenant with the nation based on the fact that He took them out of Egypt, and therefore their fruitful future generation is also part of the covenant between the Almighty God and the other two partners, which is the father and mother, and therefore it's a covenant. And the covenant here is more specifically about the Yerushat Haaretz, about the inheritance of the land, which means the Almighty meant that don't ever think that you inherited the land just by using nuclear proliferation of forces or sword, but you should know that you get it as a deposit, as a loan from God, with the condition that you follow the covenant of the Torah, and that's basically the right it gives to the future generation to possess the land, live the land, and improve and fruitful and more. It's based on the original commitment as a slave when we took us out of Egypt that we mentioned 3 times a day. Part of that commitment is fulfill the Torah and fulfill the servant commitment of inheriting the land and follow its law. So therefore, another great Spanish rabbi, Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Bakuta, 10th century judge and scholar that wrote The Duty of the Heart, he also said that it's a both side. It's a commitments, it's a responsibilities, it's obligations, and it's a zchut, it's also a great privilege. And that brings us to the idea that they believe that the peace in Israel, or peace in the life, it's based on that deal, based on that covenant that started there. And that's the commitment that the grandchildren have that goes back to their ancestors. The ancestors are the root of the trees, and the branches come out as part of that. And therefore, the moment that was accepted from the covenant, that will stay forever, those who are here and those who will be here. And the Maharal, the great 15th, 16th century rabbi, expand in his monumental book called Netzach Israel, chapter 11, on these important commitments. But back to the idea of tikkun. In order to fulfill the commitment, we need to understand the problem. The problem is that we all making mistakes, I included, right? And we as a human, we stand before God on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we said, Ashamnu, Bagadnu. We did a lot of wrong things. And we tried to make an amend, we tried to open a new chapter, we tried to have a tikkun, a repair. Teshuvah, it's a very general term, but tikkun is almost like, I'm using that just to comprehend the concept, it's like you have a collision, you have a car collision, and you bring it to a mechanic. And most of the cases, they can fix it. Rarely happens, unfortunately, that it's so bad that it's unfixable. But most of the cases, something that can be fixed. So there are 4 different avenues, if you try to summarize Jewish response to the tikkun, to the tshuva, which is based on these 2 parshiyot. As we said, there are 4 tikkunim. So I would like to start with the first one, which is the spiritual healing. Tikkun lefi halacha, meaning the way that we repair the world by following the concept of Jewish law. I would like to start with Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi was not only a physician who lived at the early 12th century, he was also a prolific author. Some say that he wrote the book Kuzari. Kuzari is a book that describes a dialogue between the 3 main monotheistic religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. The king of a place called Kuzar invites the 3 scholars to discuss the faith, and the whole big book, it's about the dialogue and interaction between the 3 different approach to monotheistic belief. And obviously it's an agenda that eventually the Jewish part makes more sense, but they attribute to Rabbi Yehuda Halevi his writing, and he talked extensively about tikkun. Another one that I'm going to just little bit visit is the well-known Rambam. Rambam, Maimonides hospitals after him. He was a physician, originally from Spain, from Cordovero, then Morocco, then in Egypt. He was the doctor of the dictator, the ruler of Egypt. But he wrote extensively about refuat hanefesh, about in a modern day, a psychiatric or psychology of human mind, human thinking, and human heart, and how to treat it. Another one that I'm based on the idea of the tikkun by halacha is Rabbi Shabtai Donolo. Rabbi Shabtai Donolo was a great Spanish rabbi that lived in the 12th century, and he wrote again about the healing of the soul. Just for us to comprehend the idea, in those days, before the concept that we know as a hospital, we have the idea that we need to have a Jewish response to the challenges. So before we have Maimonides Hospital or Johns Hopkins or other hospitals, we have this extensive writing, which is the rabbinic writing of the correlation between refuat hanefesh, between the healing of the soul and refuat and the healing of the body. So the Rambam in the Shmona Prakim, in his extensive writing in Pirkei Moshe, he analyzed the connection between the Torah and the moral, healthier life. Meaning, when we have a a prescription medicine, we know that that's just a formula that's made in the lab, and the doctor prescribes it for a patient. But in that sense, when someone needs to see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist can prescribe a serious medicine, including coding medicine and things like that, based on a lot of research and studies. In those days, it was a medicine by understanding the interaction between the theology of what's in people's mind and the physical reaction of the body, and therefore the theology and medicine interact very deeply and seriously in the Tikkun, in the concept of repair by halakha, by Jewish law. Meaning, the idea in a very simple way is you cannot study a text, any form of text, or Jewish writing, can be Torah, Mishnah, Talmud, halakha, even philosophy, without interaction between your brain and your body. It's all interconnected. And that's basically the tikkun, the foundation of tikkun by halakha, that we have heart, we have brain, we have body overall, and therefore, in order to have a tikkun, in order to have the repair, we need to go first to the source of the problem, not to the symptom, not so much to the quick result, but to go deep. We need to go the deep roots of the problem, which obviously has to do with a brain, with the thinking, with the setup, mindset, prejudice, and more. Now, with that said, we, in order to mending of self, in order to understand the correlation between, which it's called in those days the cosmos, or God, and us, therefore we have to have the tikkun by halakha. So in very short, tikkun by halakha, it's the centerpiece of Jewish understanding and philosophy, that in order for us to have a better life, we have to study, meaning the whole extensive writing of the 1st, 2nd to the 6th century of the Mishnah and the Talmud, the classical Jewish teaching, it's based on the idea that in order for us as a nation, collectively and individually, to survive, we are a nation that uprooted from its land. We are in exile. And therefore, we take the written text and expand it in order to update it. And the rabbis constantly in those days, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 6th century, the Mishnah and the Talmud, update the practical halakha in order to create a tikkun. So the same way as one said, okay, I'm observing kashrus or Shabbat, or I'm observing certain things, I'm getting married by Jewish law and things like that. It means that I correlate a double tikkun. I'm by study and praying, I'm going to change not just the physical world, but also the out of the general world. So the Jewish belief by halakha is when a fellow, he or she is praying, it makes double changes. Called by later on many scholars like Soloveitchik and many others a duality, which means when you are praying, you're affecting yourself, your body, your soul, but you're affecting your family and you're affecting society and you're affecting the whole world. So you're changing the world by doing tikkun by halakha. Just to complete the first phrase of tikkun by halakha, or teshuva by halakha, is I'm just using it as a springboard, as an example. The Torah said, "Oto ve'ed beno." When you need to eat animal, let's say you need to have a protein, you need to eat part of animal's body, the Torah warns us that we're not allowed to slaughter the mother and the baby the same location, the same day. אותו ואת בנו לא תשחטו ביום אחד. The two generations we cannot slaughter the same day. So the Jewish thinkers and those who follow halacha try to dig in and understand, in addition to, you may call it cruelty, you may call it many names of what's the effect. It's the understanding of the cosmos, of the whole world, what exactly happens to our world when we are doing such a thing to animals. So as much as our Torah allow us, by force of circumstance, if needed, eat meat, it has to be in the way that not just full of compassion and mercy, but not have a negative effect on the world, because the Jewish strongly believe that every action and every deeds that we have in our lives has a double effect, ourselves and our world around. It's the way that the Rambam wrote in the Sefer HaMadai, in the book of science, he said, Kol ha-mitzvot she-Moshe kibel mi-Sinai, all the mitzvot that Moses received in Sinai and transmitted to us is based on the idea that there is a tikkun, that there is a repairing the world in a duality. And what do I mean by that? He explained it beautifully. He said, you know that there are different books that give us the enumeration of the mitzvot. We have overall 613 commandments, mitzvot. Different books that speak about the list of the mitzvot. According to the Rambam, a little different. The Rambam said that the first mitzvah in the Torah, and he's the only one who holds it this way, is what? The first mitzvah in the Torah is to know that there is God. Lada'at, to know that there is God. And according to the Rambam, the first of the 10 commandments, I am your Lord, your God, who took you out of Egypt, meaning that's the idea that we have da, that we have the knowledge. Many, many shuls, you see a word da, know before whom you are standing, as a sign on the top of the ark or the top of the 10 commandments in many places. According to the Rambam, knowing that there is God who records all the deeds and he is the creator, that's the foundation of the tikkun. And then he says, from that point, we have the Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, to know that he's only monotheistic, there's only one God. Then, Ve'ahavta, to love God, meaning to love God is to how you command people to love. It's in the people's heart, in the human psyche, right? Is to know that He is your creator and you are commanded, even there are circumstances we don't understand. We are today in the 9/11 commemoration and we do not understand. And I believe that one of the worst things that people attribute to God, actions that appear as a wicked actions. And we said many times that World War II, with all of its horrific consequences and many evil, it's made by people, made by man. It's not, don't attribute to God something that people created. We are now in the season of the pandemic, and I can't stand when I hear people that attribute that by any means to God. It's all based on people wickedness, people evilness, which create a destruction. Therefore, we are commanded to love God and to know that God is a loving God. And then, Yirat Hashem, have the awe of God, to pray to Him, and lehidavek bo, to cleave to God. So all of that, it's part of the tikkun, which means to communicate with God, to say every day, Shema Yisrael, and above all is to study Torah, which we are doing, and teach Torah to others. Torah, we said in the ethics of the forefathers, Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai. Moses received the Torah And then umsara, meaning he transmitted. It is not that Moses had a beautiful degree and put it in the, in his office. And Moses, in a sense, is an example of someone who received, and right away the purpose of receiving it is to teach and transmit it to others, to Yoshua, to Nevim, to Zkenim, to all the future generations from one to another, all the knowledge transmitted next. That's the Tikkun by Halacha. So therefore, when a person knows that there is God always there and everything is recording, so therefore, the moment you have the da, the knowledge, the intellect, that every deed and every action is connected to God, and the point of departure in the mindset, it's God, to know that God is not told a sacrificial offering, and it's not that you are doing favor to God by coming and praying, but that you have the awareness in mind, that you have the knowledge. So therefore, that's the halacha. The halacha is basically gives you the guidelines, so you have a presence of God and awe of God throughout your day, throughout your life. And you institute in your mind, in your heart, and therefore it's inner voice, the inner things, that it's total spiritual. The moment you realize that even if it's 3 in the morning and nobody sees you, and there's a red light, and no one can give you a ticket, but you stop, right? And not because of anything, but because there is God. That's the part of feeling the presence of God. The Rambam expands and he says, many others, they said that if you always close your eyes and remind yourself that is God happy with what I'm doing, then you have the formula of tikkun. The moment that your brain is not concentrated, so therefore you don't have the basic requirement to do the tikkun. So in short, the tikkun by halacha is a combination of spirituality and religion. Religion in that sense, it's just to do what the formula gives you in your basic enculturation, in the basic way that you brought up. But the development of that and the understanding and getting deep to your understanding God's world is toward doing the mitzvot, because many people mix with the idea of religion and spirituality. Religion, in a sense, is a structure. It's a organized faith group that structure you. The halacha begins with the spirituality. According to the Rambam, it starts with that mindset, and not just by being member of community. The member of community is very important, but the spirituality in religion is total interconnected, meaning spirituality is, if you are really, really believe in that, it's like someone asks you, show me there is God. Show me that God's care for what's happened in my life. Show me how God's interfere in my life. So when you have a mitzvah like sukkah, right, you have that's, you can say that it's a practical part of the religion, but to have a mitzvah of love God, that's the intellectual, spiritual understanding. So tikkun, in short, by halacha, it's a combination of the two. It's a practical way of doing things, but also the spiritual part. And the same way as we take the etrog and the arbat minim, the 4 speeches, and we're doing it together. It's not one. It's all 4 together. That's the correlation between a person and God, which means in the moment you build a sukkah, for example, you build something of historical process. I remember the days that I used to build the sukkah with my children. Means that I'm part of history. I'm not limited to just building sukkah, it's something that stay and continue from one generation to the next. One concept of tikkun. There is another tikkun that we don't have the time today. Is the tikkun by the philosophy, the tikkun by the Kabbalah, the tikkun by the Hasidut. In very short, there are many books that great giants rabbi wrote over Teshuvah and tikkun. There are those who believe that the tikkun and Teshuvah, it's a repair that a person needs to eternalize himself on a daily basis. One of them is the story, Hasidic story of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Bardichev. The story goes that before he went to sleep in saying Shema, he did some type of self-search, like taking an inventory of the day, like someone who owns a store. By the end of the day, you check and to see that's all balanced off. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, by the end of the day, he was talking to himself. And he said, you know, Levi Yitzchak, today you messed up. You did this and this and this. Good, but you did so many wrong things. And he enumerates all the wrongdoing. And then he said to himself, okay, Levi Yitzchak promised that tomorrow I'll never do it again. And then it was a moment silent, and he said to himself, but Levi Yitzchak, that's what you said last night. And then another moment of silence, and then he said, but now Levi Yitzchak really means it. Right? So that's by the Hasidic way of Teshuvah, is the constant inventory, is a constant self-search. The person take account, if I hear gossip, if I speak evil, lashon hara, or things about people, I involved with something that maybe I shouldn't be involved. Should I be part of that or not? Is Hashem, is God happy with what I'm doing? That's the level of teshuvah as individual. There is also a teshuvah that is called collective teshuvah as a nations. I think the best example is the story we read on Yom Kippur afternoon, the story of Jonah, when God asked him to go and speak to a non-Jewish city of Nineveh. And because he warned them that they're going to be a total great destruction, they made teshuvah, non-Jewish city, and as a result, they are saved, which means not every prophecy be fulfilling. Jewish thought, when you hear the word Navi, a prophet, it's a teacher that warns people, if you don't do certain things, that will happen to you. So Jonah was a good example of someone who went to that place and asked collective people to do a collective teshuvah, and the people of Nineveh listened to him and did it. So there is many different levels of teshuvah, or understanding teshuvah. There is Rabbeinu Bachya of 9th century that speaks about teshuvah out of fear. You're afraid of punishment, and that's the reason. There is a teshuvah me'ahava, that you're doing things because you believe in it and love it. There is a different level of teshuvah. The same, even a great man like Rav Kook, the great Rav Kook, in his book, The Light, the Orot HaTeshuvah, he wrote, and again, it's a controversial point of view, but interesting. He holds that a person can be a real Baal Teshuvah only if you live in Israel. Why? Because he believed that a person can be a total secular, but by fulfilling the mitzvah of dwelling in the land and building and be fruitful in the land, that basically you collectively and individually creating teshuvah in the world. And in that sense, it's a huge difference between the way Soloveitchik, for example, saw teshuvah as a collective effort, no matter where you are, and the interconnection between a person deeds in one location and the effectiveness upon others, versus a Rav Kook that he puts it in an exact location, and by him the location makes the real teshuvah. But even Soloveitchik and many others that have this duality in teshuvah, they believe that the moment you are doing a good deed, it affects other people worldwide. It's almost like, I'm sure that you're all familiar with the Mishaberach prayer. Mishaberach prayer, if you take it by the ancient Greek understanding, the theology of the ancient Greek, there is a word called theurgy. Theurgy, if you check, it's T-H-E-R-G-Y. Theurgy is the Greek believes that every spiritual deed of a person or speech can affect someone in a different place. So in that sense, when you're saying the prayer for speedy recovery of someone who live in New Zealand, right? It's a belief that your action here, you, for example, prayer or good deed here, affects someone in a different place. So that's a very spiritual and deep understanding, the power of the prayer and the power of the tikkun by practical deeds of prayer. So to summarize what we are saying today, we talk today in covenant. In the covenant between the Almighty God and us, it's a covenant that has a different fold. Obviously, the simple physical covenant, we know the Brit Milah, the obligation to have the Brit for the baby. But we are also say that there's a different covenant, which is the covenant that God made between us, people who stand Mount Sinai, our ancestors, which is part of our commitment. And the covenant is based on 7 times repeated in the Parsha, the word Teshuvah. And in order to do Teshuvah, we understand that there are different phases of Teshuvah, different avenues of Tikkun. And we explained that Tikkun meaning a repair. And the same way as we need to repair a vehicle, we need to repair body, we also need to repair the mind. And we explained that there is a correlation between the mind and the actions that the body takes. Almost like the rabbinics write a body as a slave or servant of the mind. That the action in our hands and legs and body is based on being, in their language, subservient to the mind order. The brain, the mind, giving the body the order what to do and how to do things. And therefore, the healing of the mind starts with the tikkun, and we explained there is a tikkun by halacha, meaning to follow certain decorum of the text in order to have a double healing or triple healing, healing of body, healing of soul, and healing of the family and the world. And there is a tikkun in Jewish philosophy, which we didn't talk much. There is a tikkun by the Kabbalah of the 16th century of Sefat, that again, maybe another time. And there is a tikkun by the Hasidut, which is getting close to our days, which is a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, teaching his disciples, the idea of serving God with knowing that, yes, it was a very challenging year, and yes, we are going through a lot of ups and downs, but we wish each other Shana Tova. And I want to leave you with the food of thought, what exactly you mean by saying Shana Tova, when you wish someone have a good 5781, have a good year. What exactly you mean by that? You expunge and eradicate to totally the past year. Are you saying Shana Tova as a opposing to the previous year, like the Sephardim have at the beginning of the Machzor? May the year and its curses will be vanished, or you apply solely for the upcoming year? What exactly you meant by wishing someone have a good year, Shana Tova? And that's something to think based on this important mitzvot. The fascinating fact is that this Shabbat, these 2 Parshiyot Nitzavim-Vayelech are very succinct, are very short, but carries this important mitzvah of writing Torah, have the covenant, and mainly a repetition of the mitzvah of Teshuvah. Thank you very, very much.